What is a brand?
The number one thing a brand is not is a logo. It is that little corner of your mind that I'm trying to influence for you to think about my brand.
Welcome to another brilliant episode of the Places We'll Go show with none other than Phoebe Barter, brand director of Aviva.
Number one, know your audience better than their own mothers do. And the other one, if you can't articulate a positioning in 150 characters or less, go back to the drawing board.
Phoebe's a brilliant storyteller and brand thinker. She speaks about stories that still shape the brand's identity today.
Great leadership is having a team that are willing to walk through glass walls for you. The biggest win of being vulnerable for me would be leading my team and being completely open to them.
She reflects on leadership with disarming honesty, showing that vulnerability, curiosity and saying yes more are the keys to finding purpose, resilience.
I don't care if you all hate LinkedIn. The thing is, you have to be on it, because if you're not on it, I'm wondering, what are you doing?
So today's episode is of course brought to you by two fantastic organisations. The first, Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. This enables marketers to browse and brief agencies, receive proposals and start work all in one place. It's literally like having your own agency network at your fingertips, without the hassle, as they take care of everything from contracting, invoicing, procurement to legal. So check out Studio Space today. Our other sponsor, of course, is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity whose mission is to make the marketing industry a better place, providing grants to help create a more equitable industry and help us to level up. The Marketing Skills Trust has been instrumental in championing a more inclusive, diverse and open marketing industry. You can find out more by going to their website. Okay, let's get on with the show. Welcome, Phoebe. Amazing to have you on the show.
So great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun today. And you're synonymous with power brands. Amex, Barclaycard, Viva.
Thank you.
Aviva, Visa. So you're a great person to ask. Let's start with a punchy question. What is a brand?
The number one thing a brand is not is a logo. It is more than that. A brand, I talk about a brand being just a corner of someone's mind. It is the perception. I ask you, what's Aviva? You're going to come up with an answer. You're going to come up with an answer. It's my job to try and influence how you think about that. So it's experience. It's how we talk. It's how we look, sound, feel. It is that little corner of your mind that I'm trying to influence for you to think about my brand.
Love that. Corner of the mind.
Indeed. Well, so beyond that thought, and love to maybe make it a bit more tangible, how do you view Aviva's brand and maybe how you're evolving it as you go along?
So the thing about Aviva's brand is I'm the custodian now of the brand with an incredible team. And the thing I love about Aviva is it's been around for over 3 centuries. Wow. It's actually, I talk about it as being a fabric of the nation type of brand. And you don't get to hang around that long unless there's something really magic there. And for me, the magic is the people and the products and the experience, like the people that really put their heart and soul into the brand. And so for me, when I joined the company, I was really excited about, there's this incredible brand that's been here for so long. How can I help evolve it and take it forward and make it feel empathetic and relevant and modern and dynamic for now? So that's been the journey I've been on for the past 3 years.
Wow. Of course, 300 years old plus, but I mean, some people won't even know this, but it was Norwich Union. It was a different. Yeah. So actually, I think of Aviva as perhaps one of the classic rebrands, not just logo but the name. And so, I don't know if that's something which is even sort of lost in time. But is that something that is still? You still reflect on the fact that it was such a...
the Norwich Cathedral spire is still actually in our logo.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it's part of our heritage, and part of my role actually is I look after group archives as well. Yeah. And it is so much fun. It's like a treasure trove of going in and finding all these stories. Like some of our major clients, they've been clients of ours for hundreds of years, some of them a couple of 100 years. And I'm talking big names across the UK. And so there's this kind of continuity. And yes, we've merged with other companies and bought other companies along the way. But having the focus of what's the central tenet of this brand and this business, what do we stand for? How do we kind of keep articulating ourselves in a modern way? So to your point about Norwich Union, the time was right to rebrand, and that was, one of my predecessors. And then, we moved to Aviva, and we carry on as Aviva for now.
And here we are. I love the thought that you are part and looking after that archive, because when you hear talk about brands and the history and heritage that brands bring, in fact, when we study brands, it's often the case of going back in time to really understand the roots of where brands came from. And often a lot of the answers that we're trying to solve for today perhaps have been looked at in times gone by. And I wonder to what extent, some of those key moments in the archive still ring true today, and things that you still hold dear as a brand. Are there any nuggets there that you think about?
So I think, the central tenet of what we do is protection, right? We're protecting your assets, your loved ones, all sorts of things. And when I was in the archives, I think it was last year, the head archivist, Anna, she showed me some pistols. And they were actually, if I'm going to get this right, they were the pistols of Thomas Bignold, who was one of the founders of what is now known as Aviva, kind of 325 years ago. And he used to go up and down the highways, I think between Norwich and I can't remember where else he was going. And he was concerned about highwaymen stealing what he was taking with him. And so he had these pistols to protect himself, because that's what you did in kind of that day and age. And he had this kind of brainwave. Wouldn't it be interesting if there was a company who could actually provide me protection for my assets? And that was kind of how one of our first companies started. And I find that beautiful, that protection has always been at the heart.
It really is.
Although today, not with guns.
Well,
very important to say, today that is not the method of the
slightly
business.
Evolved.
Yes.
We've moved on, but it's a lovely story, and it brings to life beautifully our insurance. Obviously, I've worked in insurance for a decade as well. It's lives and livelihoods. Which is also making me think, like, we need to get archiving something. What do we archive? Well, obviously, we've got like YouTube and Spotify. Is that the modern archive? I don't know.
It must be.
School of Marketing Archives.
I'll have to think about that.
I'm just like right now, I'm formally appointing you as Chief Archivist as well as CEO. There you go.
There we are. I'm ready.
Just have a new title.
Ready to go.
If you want to chat to Anna over at Aviva, let me know. I'll put you in touch.
More than happy to do that. I love that. And in fact, I love extending job titles. It seems that I'm growing in importance. So
and we could take pistols.
Gun to my head.
Gun to my head. Well, so look, we jumped straight in around.
We did.
Brand went fairly deep. Let's wind all the way back, and we often ask the question, like, how the hell did you end up in marketing?
It's such a good question. It was all a bit accidental, I think. So I finished school and I was told I had to go to university, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I kind of just filled in the form and went, interior architecture, that sounds amazing. And went to my first day, and it was physics and building and calculus, and I was a bit like, wait, I thought I was going to be an interior designer. So I stuck that out for 6 months and then did what all good Aussies do. I came over here and worked in a bar for a while, and then went back to Sydney and said, right, well, I'll just study economics because I love maths, and that feels like a sensible choice, and I'll be a business person one day. And during that economics degree, I took I just happened to take an optional subject in consumer behaviour, and I loved it, and I was fascinated by it, and I just thought, this is fascinating how you can influence and create kind of ideas around, the corners of the mind. And so I just veered that way. And so my first job, I kind of thought I'd be an economist, but my first job I ended up being in a marketing agency in Sydney. And then I moved on to Amex and then Barclays. And I know we're going to talk about this, but I just kind of job after job was like, this marketing thing's really fun. And it was the combination, I think, of creativity and numbers that drew me in. So maybe I got a bit of that design after all.
But I tell you, Phoebe, it was interesting because Les Burnett had something very similar to say as well, where he talked about that marketing is really a blend of economics and psychology. So there you go. You are on point.
I am on point,
Maybe
Les.
you've always meant to be a marketer.
Well, I admire Les a lot, so that's good. We're on message, Les.
We can definitely listen to Les. I won't tell the story about what happened with the the subtitles on Les's episode, but
Do check that out. Quite funny.
just check that one out offline, not to be repeated. Our last guest, Catherine Newby-Grant, was economist turned marketer. I was economist turned marketer. So there's
Maybe this is a thing.
Richie's got about 15 degrees.
Possibly.
I'm sure there's economics in there somewhere, but it's a thing, isn't it? Because of course, yes, building brands, but it's not for the stuff of it. It's a commercial endeavor. So I think that marketing science blend is a thing. So in your role, how do you think? I'm jumping back in today. We'll go back to the previous story, but how do you blend the commercial aspect of brand building into your day to day?
So I'm accountable to the board and our executive committee. So I need to be able to talk to them as business owners in Fin Services in a way that makes sense to them. So, it's not just them going, here, Phoebe, go and spend all this money and have a lot of fun. I mean, it's right. We're going to give you this money, you invest it and show us the return on it. So you need to be comfortable going around a spreadsheet. You need to be comfortable with, understanding how the P&L works. And so for me, I find that's really good grounding that, I love the creative space. That's where I live in the design, and that brings me passion and joy. But I'm very comfortable talking about the numbers as well. And, you talked about the science part. It is, at the base of it, it's neuroscience, it's building connections, it's understanding what's going on in your brand tracker. I could boast and say we're number one across all brand metrics, which we are. However, I always then say to the team, but what's going on inside that? Because we can't be number one forever. So actually, where's the real story? And that's probably training from more of that economic background.
Yeah.
I love that thinking there. In fact, me and Mark were at the Marketing Society Digital Day yesterday as well. Busy days. Having lots of fun, I have to say. But actually, there was quite a few sessions there about the changing nature of search. And in fact, there was one specifically about Google and how we're losing the game and war on clicks given the way that Google is now evolving. Yeah. And actually, one of their key recommendations were around brand. And how do you create advocacy and brand value and resonance in brand? And of course, this is probably the ultimate debate in marketing, right? Brand versus performance. And so when you do go to a board, clearly one of the things they'll be asking about when it comes to ROI, the dreaded word, is how do you then view that, and how do you view brand in that context, and how do you kind of justify the longer term reach versus the short term the short-term click-throughs.
Yeah, luckily we've got folks like Les Binet who write all sorts of incredible books about this stuff, right? The long and the short.
But do the board get that? Because it's a marketing spiel, right?
Honestly, not always. Yeah. And also probably not always is a generous answer. I think that of course they get it academically, yes, but they're managing big P&Ls that are based on in-year returns. And if these are public companies, they have to answer to people on a quarterly cycle. So, I might say naively kind of wander in and go, guys, we're going to do all this long-term brand building. It's going to pay off like you wouldn't believe in 18 months time. All the cash is going to come rolling in. And they'd be like, that's amazing. But we've got shareholders now that we need to respond to. So it can be a really tough debate. And it's something that I know a lot of CMOs spend a lot of time talking about. I heard a friend of mine, Jess Myers at the very group, she says something brilliant that I've actually stolen with pride, which is brand is sales waiting to happen. And I think that's so smart because, rather than talking about it being this long-term thing, which obviously it is, and we in the industry know that, when I'm facing into those more financial conversations, I break it down into quarter on quarter. So like I'm building the pool here, the brand here, so that when we come in next quarter, we drop in and you guys can scoop all of that up at the bottom of the funnel. So I've broken it, kind of sneakily made it a short-term thing. I
like that. I like that a lot. In fact, I was just resonating with something, Mark, you said maybe last week or 2 weeks ago around the Fixer campaign, where you actually saw in year one that actually it was as much a performance driver as it was a brand lever.
Yeah, I think the lines are so blurred. And yeah, it was the number one performance channel, brand TV.
Yeah.
Because we could see the short and the long-term ROIs, the clever econometric side. And I think, with connected TV, for example, it's all changing. The whole landscape is changing massively. I think when we spoke a little while ago, and I asked you about how does it sort of all shake out between brand and marketing and so on. I think what's really fascinating about your setup is that you sit to the side as a peer of the marketing machine, which I think you had a lovely point on this, which was that gives me freedom to have a bigger organizational impact, not constrained by marketing per se. And so tell us a bit about that. Is it a funnel relationship, or how do you sort of see that relationship?
Well, technically it's funnel because we kind of carve up our swim lanes so that we don't kind of clash, and we make sure that we're spending our kind of investment in the right way and our resource energy as well. But like you said, I love that I get to sit across the whole organization, and that's so fun. So everything from experience to working with the people team on the colleague value proposition, to the brand refresh, which we've done at Aviva, to workplace design, things that I don't think I'd get to touch if I was just sat at the top of the marketing funnel. So I think it works really well. And then the way we influence it is, we work with our great agencies. We all get along. The marketing directors and I all get along. I saw you the other day with Paul.
Indeed.
He's a good mate.
Really good guy.
We all work together on the common platform and we make it work.
I love that thought, Phoebe, because what you're playing into is a thought that marketing is so much more than what we often give it credit for.
Yeah.
And I love that notion. And in fact, as marketers, we should try and champion that as much as we absolutely can. There was something that I recall where it was Jeremy Connell-Waite. I don't know if you've come across him. One of the most amazing storytellers. In fact, he's got this wonderful skill where he's able to diagnose and dissect really famous people's speeches, and he does a really great infographic of the speech.
I'm going to check him out.
Amazing. Yeah. But what he said, which I found lovely and has stayed with me years later, was that he said he actually had his major successes when he stepped out of the formal marketing realm.
Interesting.
And I really found that to be quite a fascinating insight there. And perhaps a little bit of resonance of what you've described right there, where you're able to have a broader reach than just what we typically see as comms.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
I like that. I'll check him out.
You must.
It's a thing actually. The word marketing is, and we're getting into a bit of an existential conversation. I've heard people saying that was the criteria for restructuring cuts. Anybody who's got marketing in their title.
Oh God.
So that's one reason to change your job title. But Jeremy was like something like chief evangelist or something like that. Yeah. And a very deliberate thing to sort of deposition himself from what might be perceived as the fluff of marketing.
I want to just come on to the thought, and Phoebe, you mentioned this around you get to understand and create stories. And Jeremy, big fan, big storyteller. And I wonder, what role do stories play and storytelling play in when you're trying to create brand strategy?
I mean, they are the point. The stories, as humans, that's how we relate to each other. We tell stories. That's what tribal songs were. That's how information was passed down. I cannot hold, if my CFO ever watches this, she will laugh and she'll say, yes, this is true. I cannot hold numbers in my head unless I create a story around them. Like, that is just how my brain works. And we know that stories from a neuroscience perspective, they trigger different pathways. So we relate to that. It's emotional. It creates kind of resonance. So storytelling is all about brand. What is the relevance that this brand, product, service can play in your life? And here's a story around that, rather than just me going, this is the percentage and this is the facts and figures around it. It's not interesting to engage with.
You've said something super interesting, maybe without even realizing it, which is that
probably
for many people, numbers are a bit of a mystery. And and maybe for some people it's formally dyscalculia and so on. But I remember, so I'm a big campaigner for neurodiversity. There's a lot in our family, and there's a particular video of Richard Branson talking about the fact he didn't understand margins and profitability until a CFO drew an ocean with fish, and drew a net around the fish, and this bit is revenue and this bit is profit. And he said, it turns out we weren't nearly as profitable as I thought we were as a company.
I'm telling you, the fish.
Exactly. But you can become one of the most successful private businesses in the world without understanding profitability at its very heart. So I thought that was a fascinating insight. So storytelling, massively important in terms of connecting to brands and the corners in their mind. I once heard a lovely expression, at a personal level, the only story that matters is the story we tell ourselves.
Oh, so true.
Because then we'll tell it with conviction and confidence and so on. So I'm interested, what are the stories you tell yourself about your career in marketing?
So I've had such a varied career in marketing, but like all leaders, and I don't think as leaders we talk about this enough, there's definitely been lots of moments of self-doubt along the way. And I think there's almost like this belief that once you get to a certain level, it's like all of your imposter feelings disappear and suddenly you're out there like ruling the world. And that's just not true. And so there have been many a moment throughout my career that I've had self-doubt moments. And actually, in those moments, I kind of almost need to go through all my triumphs in my head. Yeah. And I do this, particularly if I'm about to walk out on stage, if I'm feeling a bit nervous. I'm like, wow, you've led gold-plated brands. You've led highly engaged teams. You've done amazing things. You've lived in New York and London and Sydney. And did you ever think you would make this career for yourself? So I have to be my own cheerleader at times, and that's kind of the story. I worked with a coach once who said, think of it as a story of triumph. Like think of it of all the successes that you've had. Now, I hope that doesn't make me sound like I'm being quite arrogant or conceited, but it's actually because so often I do think, oh God, like, am I making the right decision here? And then you have to go, come on. Yeah. You know you are. You've done this before. So the story I tell myself is, wow, what a great career. How lucky you are to have had it.
Beautiful. Not at all arrogant or conceited at all. Same conference we were at yesterday. Sophie Devonshire, CEO of Marketing Society, told a story about, I can't remember exactly who it was, but her way of getting up for a big moment was to stand in front of the mirror and say, fuck 'em. And
I can imagine her saying that.
I think we all need a mantra in times of doubt, just to lift ourselves into the space we need to be in.
Do you know what? You've just reminded me, Ted Lasso. I love that show. The CEO, when she stands in front of the mirror and she's a little girl and she kind of goes, that sounds like that.
So true. And related to good old Ted Lasso and perhaps a bit of imposter, you talked about the role of leadership and that you've led and you've been across these fantastic organizations. And I wonder if you've had any self-reflections on perhaps your leadership style or what makes a good leader, or perhaps you've had an incredible boss at different points in time and what have you learned from them? Tell us a bit more about the way you think about leadership.
I've had the best bosses and the worst bosses, like everyone, right? And you take a bit of a potpourri. You take, right, that's what I like and that's what I don't like, and we'll leave that behind.
Some of the worst ones.
Right. No, so I think leadership, certainly so I've been working for, I should know the number, I can't hold numbers in my head, like 25 years, I guess I've been working. And I think leadership has changed so much in that time. If I think back to what it meant to be a good leader when I started out, I think about 5 or 6 years into my career, I was living in New York and it was the world financial crisis. And, at that time, leadership at that time was, keep smiling and serving the peanuts. Everything's going to be fine. Do not at any point say things are hard. Like, we're going to get through this, batten down the hatches. Don't show yourself at work. And kind of you learn that's good leadership in that time. And then thank goodness we've been on such an evolution, I think, in recent years in terms of understanding mental health and also vulnerability and leadership. And now I think leadership is much more about being your authentic self. I possibly over-indexed a bit on vulnerability along the way and maybe let my team see too much for a while. But I think now good leadership and what I've learned from the best leaders, bringing it back to your question, is actually another human being just kind of trying to get the best work done and find the best way through. Empathy as well. If my leaders that ask me, actually, how are you doing? Like, how are the kids? That's amazing. I love that. And I love knowing that about my teams.
Brené Brown, vulnerability is the first thing we expect in others, the last thing we want to show to others.
So true.
So tell us, like, a really big win came off of taking a risk and being really vulnerable. Just give confidence to people out there that this is a very powerful leadership currency.
I think the biggest win of being vulnerable for me would be leading my team and being completely open to them. and I would count my current team in that, as well as teams I've led previously. I think, one of my mentors said to me, great leadership is having a team that are willing to walk through glass walls for you. And you only get that if they trust you. So, my team know if I'm nervous about something, if I'm excited about something, if I'm disappointed, if I feel like I've made a bad decision, I'll be very open, and that could feel a bit uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable even admitting that to you here in front of all of our closest friends. But they see, I believe they see me as a human who wants the best for all of us, and therefore the discretionary effort that they and their teams then put in to build what we're trying to create is greater because we're all doing it together. So I would say it's as simple as that.
Well, thank you for being vulnerable about vulnerability.
We're going places I did not expect.
Well, it is the places we'll go.
There's places we go. Yeah,
it's true.
Spoiler alert for any future guests. We sort of tee it up as this sort of very gentle roll around your current.
Listen, I'm having fun. This is great.
So I just wanted one more question about leadership, because what you've described is a very, very human-centric form of leadership, and I know you've done the IRG as well. And so let's just take the conversation a different place, which is, as leaders, we had to get used to hybrid working in the context of virtual in person.
Yeah.
But the new hybrid leadership is human, non-human. When parts of our people's roles, or even whole people's roles, creates a hybrid leadership challenge between human and non-human. And I think this is just a breaking topic. Nobody's a guru on it yet. I've not seen anything definitive. But how do you think about the world? Because something is lost and something is gained. How do you think about that future world?
I mean, what a question. I think I have every feeling from absolute joy and excitement to absolute fear and existential crisis. I think if we can stay curious and keep our minds open, then I think there's only great things to be had. I think, if I'm speaking on behalf of Aviva, which I guess I always am, we always talk about there has to be a human in the loop, that we're incredibly excited about all of the opportunities. And, we're already seeing massive improvements in efficiency and all sorts of things I could geek out on. But having that, where is it going to go? I saw something the other day that, is it Moore's law that we've actually disproved Moore's law now.
We have.
So I don't think any of us, to your point, actually really know what we're talking about. Just be really nice to your Alexas.
Yeah, exactly. See your thank yous. In fact, funny enough, there was a Sam Altman article that came out that basically said that saying thank you and welcomes to
train them, right? Yeah.
Well, not only that, it's actually costing them millions and millions in extra processing time.
No, really?
It's true.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
I loved it because clearly the thought about it being polite cost you nothing and all of those idioms is out the window now when it comes to AI. So there we are.
But it's a lovely story, whether or not it's true, because I've also heard that some people say you need to bully ChatGPT to like push it. But then other people saying, no. If you are nice to it, it will give a better outcome.
Well, there we go.
So this is all talk about existential, this.
I mean, we need to do an A/B test.
Clearly, as marketers in the room, clearly. By the way, obviously Mark's the hard question guy.
But
today, I mean, I don't really where's it coming from.
I say to my chat all the time, I'm like, that was a really great answer. Thank you so much for your help.
Exactly. Me too.
Why am I acting like that?
Wait a minute, Phoebe.
I'm such a people
do you
pleaser.
have a name for your ChatGPT?
Oh, I don't.
Oh, well, there we are.
What was Sophie's?
I think it was Theo. I think from Theo yesterday. There we are.
But if in the world, I mean, we've all watched The Truman Show and so on and so forth, Terminator and all those cool movies. In a world where it is all-knowing and all-powerful, I think it's going to have been a good idea to have been polite to it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I know we're joking, but
True.
I want it to know that humanity is actually here for the good. There are some bad eggs, but we're mostly good. We mostly say please and thank you.
And selfishly, it will Well,
Well, exactly.
They will
So-
know we were kind. We're
So,
fine.
so despite the cost and probably costing, OpenAI a bit more, we're still going to say our pleases and thank yous to ChatGPT. Fine, got that.
Okay.
Although now I'm thinking about the sustainability impact of
gosh.
it. Yeah. So
It really is circular,
I mean,
isn't
I'm
it?
just going to have to sit in a corner for a while and think this through.
Absolutely. Well, next question. Let's move on here. I was fascinated, by the way, when you talked about all the places that you've lived in. Really great in terms of a career and how you've been able to navigate those different environments. I want to know what would you say? Well, first thing that came to my mind was, well, what's your favorite city to have worked in? But beyond that, maybe a bit of a contrast of like different landscapes, different cultures. How have you sort of been able to navigate different environments in which you've worked?
Okay, that is yet another great question, because an Aussie moving to New York, then moving to London.
Right.
I mean, I've had culture shock in each of them, and
bet.
well, thank you for saying that, because I kind of wouldn't have thought that on paper. But I remember showing up in New York. So I was internally transferred with Amex in 2007, and I make the joke it was probably one of the last relocations before the world, the global crisis, the financial crisis. But I kind of showed up and was friendly and happy to be there and asking everyone about their weekends, and kind of all these very serious Americans were like, no, we don't do that. And I was like, what? How do we talk to each other? So I kind of got used to this very mid-2000s, late 2000, 2010-ish culture of New York financial services. This is very serious. And then,
Is it always on? Was it always on? I mean, is that a part of my perception of it, by the way? I've never lived in the States, so is that part of it?
It was always on, but I lived in Manhattan and I was in my late 20s, so it was phenomenal. At the same time, I love my children, but I didn't have kids at the time, so I had a disposable income and I was living in New York. It was
I remember those
amazing.
days.
Yeah, those were the days. And I knew I wouldn't be there forever, so I made an effort to see as much of America as I could. So I would go on weekend trips, and it was just a joy. I was very lucky. So I had a great time there, and then I showed up in London again with Amex. They transferred me. It was time for me to move here. And I remember being in the lifts one of the first days at Amex in Belgravia, and someone asked me how my weekend was, and I was like, why are they asking me how my weekend was? We don't do that. And then I kind of had to adjust
Americanized.
to, yeah, exactly. And then I had to find my inner Aussie again and realize, no, this is we actually share here. This is more open. And so then I adjusted to that. So even though it may not look on paper like there's a lot of cultural differences in the workplace.
I want to go to, you said you had some amazing leaders, bosses, line managers, and some not so good ones. Maybe just a chance to do a shout out. A really amazing boss you've had, but very specifically the impact they had on your path.
Okay. So this would be Alison Bain at Amex, who was the CMO of the international business. And, we talk about being an Amex trained marketer. We talk about the Amex way in the same way there's a P&G way and others. And she was, and still is, I'm still in touch with her. I saw her a couple of weeks ago, actually. She was just brilliant in terms of saying, right, this is the process of marketing. This is the discipline of it from soup to nuts. And this is how we measure it. And this is how you speak credibly to the business. I learned so much from her. And she used to have two sayings that I still use today. Any of my team will tell you. Number one, know your audience better than their own mothers do. She told me that. And the other one is, if you can't articulate a positioning in 150 characters or less, go back to the drawing board, which she always said she stole with pride from Steve Jobs.
Oh, well, there we go.
But I think that is brilliant. And she just had I feel like I learned marketing from her.
Pre-Twitter, she was saying 150 characters.
No, it was around Twitter time.
Around Twitter
I think
time,
that's where it came from.
So profound. I mean, it's true. I mean, you probably could ask GPT to do a reasonable stab at that these days.
Well, I think
the point is a brilliant one.
But I do think that's interesting. And actually yesterday...
Focus, single-minded.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Somebody, in fact, it was Catherine yesterday, who was talking of the one-pager. And to distill your thinking down to its lowest, simplest format, which enables you to kind of have it ingrained in your mind. And today that whole world is evolving in such a rapid pace, given you can, in fact, you actually probably audio chat GPT, not to go back to good old chat GPT, but it's the notion that you can actually, use these technologies in a different way than we've done before, but very much changing the way that we think, the way that we do work, and we move on through.
Well, it's the whole point about brands. I mean, not to go over old territory, but I always talk about brand is just that North Star. Like if you can't just define that in a simple way for a whole organization to remember, then you're going to have as many colleagues as are in that organization, different interpretations of your brand. So it's just that one simple statement.
And clearly not just to keep blowing your trumpet. The thought then is, when I think about the world of agentic and the way that we're moving and automation and actually it's in some ways dehumanizing the process, the end-to-end process. What is left? But if it's not the brand, the hallmark of which we go by and we live by, I think that's so important, both personally as well as corporates in which we work, in which we interact with. I want to come on to, so you've had a stellar career, a range of different organizations, global in nature. There must have been times when it hasn't all been rosy, and maybe times where you've kind of felt a little bit stuck. And I wonder, what have you used? What lessons have you taken there that you can sort of impart around getting unstuck and kind of getting your mojo back?
I've definitely felt that many times throughout my career. I think we all have. And so I think there's a few things. I think number one, seeking out what excites you and what inspires you. So the times that I felt in my career that maybe might sound a bit American here, and I do love the Americans, all of our friends. I love this expression, when your kind of vector of learning growth has flattened, like when you go and you need to find a way to find another one and go, and whether that's a side hustle in your current role, whether that's doing some learning, whether that's reaching out to other people in your organization or elsewhere, to just find a way to get inspired again and figure out a new way to learn. That, I think, just ignites something. Number one. I think number two, I've been guilty in the past of when I feel like I've lost my mojo, kind of getting a bit down in the dumps over it all, and that's really natural. That's a human reaction. But to shout out a great friend of mine, Helen Wetton at BT, she has this great expression where she talks about like being on an airplane and if there's turbulence, like just strap in and remember that the turbulence gives you lift and it gets you to that next place. And once she said that, I was like, that is amazing. And so that's something that I like to think about as well. Like sometimes you have to get comfortable with, right, I need to know that this doesn't feel great, but it doesn't feel great because that's the kind of shove I need to learn a bit more and maybe dream a bit bigger and do something more. And if that's a new role, maybe, or if that's a side hustle that leads to a new role in your current organization, maybe, or it's just something that gets you through the period and helps you find your mojo again.
Love it.
Turbulence as almost as a gift. You also, the side hustles thing. I mean, obviously, Richie, you and I, we've sort of made careers out of side hustles. But favorite side hustle you've had?
So I'm side hustling a little bit at the moment.
Yeah.
All around data and insights.
Yeah.
Because it's not technically part of my role, but how could you possibly do my role without understanding it? So, and of course I understand it, but it's moving so fast and there's so much kind of speed that I'm kind of side hustling with our data and insights team, being like, hey, can I get involved in that? And can you teach me that? And I've never heard of that before. Could someone sit down and take me through it, like, 101 guide? And that's within my current role, but it's making me better at my job, and it's an internal side hustle.
I love that thought, by the way, because alongside the learning process and being able as an enabler to do what you do better, so your timings to your effectiveness, what you're also doing is enabling yourself to sort of reach out to new teams, build new networks, create new opportunities. And I wonder if there is, if there's your thought about what advice would you give around creating opportunities? Because you've been able to clearly navigate multiple organizations and even internally lots of promotions, therefore.
Yeah.
Opportunities, how do you create them?
I guess I don't know if I would advocate this as advice, but I've kind of just never said no. And
It's the best form.
And
That's why you're here.
I just always go, and sometimes I probably could have gone, oh, my plate's a bit full at the moment, but I've just always gone, you know what, why not? Talking about great leaders, I at Barclays very nearly shouted out Emma Isaac. He was a wonderful leader of mine, and then she left and moved to NatWest with David Walden, who was also a leader of mine, and they left. And when she left, then her role kind of was open, and I didn't wait. I kind of just was like, all right, well, I'll just come and do all that stuff now. And then everyone was like, oh, well, Phoebe's doing that. So like you just grab stuff and go with it, but not in a territorial way, obviously, but just don't say no to opportunities and help where you can.
It's really nice, because people often say that if you're looking for a promotion,
do the job
yeah,
first. Don't ask for the promotion, just do the job, and then they'll say, well, you're doing it, so why wouldn't we?
A really great piece of advice.
It would be crazy to have you as a brand expert on and not talk about personal brand. And so I'm very curious, is it something you think about consciously or obliquely, or what's your take on personal branding?
I think you have to think about it. I think it's one of those things that might give most people the ick. I mean,
love it, yeah.
But like it or not, each of us has a personal brand. Coming back to everyone will have opinions about the three of us after watching this show, and why wouldn't you want to try and influence that somehow? So I think it's important. And again, it feels like this has just been a stream of shout outs, but it was Emma who first encouraged me to think about my personal brand. And actually a boss previous to her as well that I did some work with. And I remember saying she said, what's your brand? This is not Emma, this is someone at Amex. And I think I said, reliable, trustworthy, expert. And she said, that is so boring. Why would you want anyone to think of you that way? I thought you worked in branding. And I was like, because I'm corporate, I am reliable, I am trustworthy. And she was like, ugh. And so then it was work with Emma that I did to kind of figure out, well, it's fun, it's expert, it's communicator, it's these sorts of things that form my brand.
One of the key notions of brand is this thought about frequency and repeatability and consistency. Showing up, constantly showing up, memory structures, reinforcement. And I know that we know that branding 101. But how would you do that from a personal branding perspective? Is that something that you think about in terms of showing up, being a part of things?
Definitely. I think that's a really loaded question as well. If you think about hybrid work structures at the moment,
yes.
There's not presenteeism, but then obviously if you're visible in an office, people see you more, and that shouldn't make a difference, but maybe it does because you're front of mind. So I think that's something interesting for each individual to think about, or find other ways to be seen and heard if they're making a choice to not be in an office, which is totally fine, by the way. But I think that's an interesting thing that no one quite has the right mix on at the moment. But, I was at a event earlier this week, which was really special, actually. It was a charity leaders day. So it's a charity that specifically was set up to help other charities perform better. So they bring in different experts to talk to them about, right? So I was like the brand person. This is how you do brand building. This is how you do finance. This is how you do other things so that they can go and perform better as charities. Amazing. And there was a guy talking to them about PR. And he was saying to this room full of charity CEOs, he said, I don't care if you all hate LinkedIn. The thing is, you have to be on it, because if you're not on it, I'm wondering, what are you doing? Like literally, what are you doing as a charity? Because I don't know what you're doing because you're not telling me. So you have to put yourself out there. And I thought that was that's specific to the not-for-profit sector. But I thought that was an interesting point. So if you're looking for a role or you're looking for something, LinkedIn is an odd yet wonderful yet odd place. It's an interesting point.
It reminded me of the Nishma Rob point where she talked about visibility.
Yeah.
What do you think about?
Well, actually, I was going to go to again, I think do we all go to events all the time?
I know what we're doing.
I swear I work.
Squeeze the work in somewhere. But Richie and I bumped into Laura Fox yesterday, who we've been talking with a few bits and pieces. A shout out to Laura. So I've never asked Laura if she married somebody whose surname was Fox, so she could be Laura Fox, the LinkedIn Fox. But I'm going to do a straightforward shout out for Laura. If you do want to really soup up your LinkedIn profile, you can do a lot worse than going to Laura. But if I just think about you, and so LinkedIn, it's inevitable, it's inexorable, you've got to be good at it. Anything specific that you would say about the way that you approach LinkedIn that would benefit people listening in?
I think you have to find a way to operate on LinkedIn that feels aligned to who you are. So I personally, and actually it was an old boss, Alison, who I saw recently, she said, I've noticed on LinkedIn, you're always shouting out your team and other people. And I guess I do that purposefully, but also that's a way I feel comfortable engaging with LinkedIn, because I don't want to go on there and be like, look at all of these amazing successes I personally have had, blessed. Like that's great, but that doesn't feel like me. That makes me feel a bit sick in my mouth. So I like to engage with it. I know I have a duty in my role to engage with LinkedIn for the sake of the company that I work for, but I like to highlight the success of others, and that feels more aligned to me than anything else.
It's so funny because it really is effective, and the great anecdote, I mean, as you go back to Paul and the breakfast that I was having with him a few weeks ago, and of course you came in, and the first thing I said was, hey Phoebe, I know you from LinkedIn. And it's true, isn't it? And that's just amazing. Actually, it's often the fact that people are watching, and they are, you are visible on there, regardless of someone, whether they're clicking, commenting, or liking, or whatever it is. There's lots of visibility to be had over there. In fact, I was just coming back to the point I was making with Nishma Robb. Wonderful, ex Google, now Clitosphere, fantastic. Yeah. And we were on a panel with her the other day, and she was talking about visibility, and actually that we do need to be visible. I think there's this almost a responsibility for all of us to actually take control of our own careers, our own, our own voices, as it were. And she had this lovely phrase that stuck with me, which is, who holds the mic is the question that she was asking. And it's for all of us to take greater control, to have a bit of a voice and hold that mic ourselves and create that air, as it were.
Yeah,
so
I like that.
Shout out to Nishma in that one.
So one of the times we met fairly recently was Marketing Society annual lecture, Amanda Blanc.
Yes.
Great session. She came, I'm sure she's got like the side that faces off to investors and boards and so on, but she came across as very human and humble and didn't take herself too seriously. This is not a sycophantic shout out to Amanda, but because she's your boss and all that, but I mean, she's driving momentum, she's having a lot of success. What's her power as a leader?
Clarity and conviction. She's without a doubt one of, if not the best person I've ever worked for. And I'm not just saying that because she signs the paychecks. So when I was interviewing for the role at Aviva, I had to meet a lot of people, as you can imagine, and Amanda was one of them that interviewed me. And I put down the phone, and actually it was a Teams call. I went like that. And called the recruiter, and I said, I will do anything to work for that woman. Like, she is incredible. And I'll tell you a story about her that I remember very early on in my time at Aviva. There was an incident, a massive claims incident around fires in London, and I happened to be at an Aviva event this time, standing with the chief claims officer. And she came over and she kind of said, right, where are we on the numbers? And he rattled off the numbers. And then she just turned to me and she just went, think of all of those families, all of those photo albums, all of those people. And I'm getting a bit teary just remembering the story, because I just thought, you're a massive CEO of a FTSE 50 company that talks to, every member of government and rubs shoulders with the biggest and the best, and you're standing here empathetically thinking about families. And she leads with empathy but clarity. Like, if you will know when she's not happy. But I like that because she just wants to do the very best.
We heard yesterday that you could be really strong on the numbers, but yet you should be really kind to your people. And I think great leaders are able to delineate between the two.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of the segment, and
No, that's flown.
Insane. But you talked about your career and clearly those days in New York, and I wonder if reflecting back on your time and doing it all over again, are there any key lessons that you would tell yourself, good or bad, if you had to do it all over?
It all works out, and it happens for a reason. And behind every closed door was a better door waiting to be opened.
Wow.
There you go. Brilliant way to end. Thank you, Phoebe. It's been amazing having you on.
I have had so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.